Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well and thanks for tuning in to another episode of UVA Weekly. You've been hearing a lot from us this week and I appreciate your patience and continued attention as we work together to manage COVID-19 in our community. It's a bit of a grab bag from me this week, but let me start with the headline. As you know, at the advice of healthcare experts, we've instituted 3 updated guidelines that will be in place for at least the next 2 weeks. First, gatherings should be limited to groups of 5 or fewer. Second, masks are required except when you're eating in your room or exercising outdoors or in accordance with IMREC guidelines. And third, for students, we urge no travel outside of Charlottesville unless truly necessary, and similarly discourage inviting visitors from outside of Charlottesville. I also hope you saw the email from Dean Groves yesterday that clarified a few points about these new restrictions. I know the guidance on travel in particular has led to a lot of questions, so here's the basic idea. We understand that our students have important reasons to travel, a major family event, for example, or a job interview, or a trip to collect data for research you're conducting. That's not our main focus with these new guidelines. What we're asking you to do is to please stay put in Charlottesville for the next couple of weeks, if it's at all possible. For the next 2 weeks, we especially discourage making any new travel plans that can be avoided, and we ask that you consider making adjustments in cases where a trip is easy to reschedule. More generally, for those of you who have asked questions about the guidelines, thank you. It shows how much you're trying to follow them. I will say that if you see a gray area or some ambiguity, it's perfectly fine to ask for clarification, but you can also use your best judgment. We're not trying to trip up anyone on technicalities, and if you exercise your best judgment or make an honest mistake, you aren't going to get in trouble. If you intentionally and repeatedly or egregiously violate the guidelines, you will get in trouble. We understand that these new guidelines will impose even more of a burden than you're already bearing, and we don't adopt them lightly. We're following the advice of public health experts who have told us that we need to take these measures for the next couple of weeks to slow down the spread of the virus, which is in the interests of all of us. In terms of additional efforts to promote safety, as most of you have heard, we've also ramped up our testing programs over the last week, including testing wastewater from residence halls and testing entire dorms when we find signs of infection. More on that later in the program. Thank you again to all of you who have gone through this testing process, and thanks in advance to those who may be asked to get tested in the weeks ahead. Testing is a critical element of containing the virus, and we appreciate your cooperation. As part of our effort to ramp up our testing program, we've also created a saliva test that will allow us to expand testing in a quick and non-invasive way. Earlier this week, I had a chance to stop by a newly created saliva screening station on grounds, and we'll be rolling out more stations in the coming weeks. I'm grateful to our Vice President for Research, Ram Ramasubramanian, for leading the effort to get this program up and running. I also had the opportunity to visit the O Hill Dining Hall on Monday, and I was incredibly impressed with how the team has modified their operations to serve meals safely to our students. Thank you to all of our dining hall staff for everything you're doing to keep our community safe and well-fed. Finally, I'd like to answer a question from our Charlottesville neighbors and reinforce a couple of things that Dean Groves shared with you last week. Our neighbors in the Charlottesville community had a question about where our students are being quarantined and isolated on and off grounds, and some of the rest of you may be wondering as well. The answer is that we have set aside housing on grounds for both isolation and quarantine of students who reside in university housing. A small number of students are isolating or quarantining in hotels near grounds as well, and I can assure you that all safety precautions are being taken to avoid further spread of the virus. 2 things that Dean Groves shared in an earlier message that I'd like to amplify for students. First, please don't forget to get your flu shot, which is especially important this year. You can get a shot at Student Health and Wellness or at a local pharmacy, and we recommend doing so before the end of October. More information is available on the Student Health and Wellness website. Second, navigating university life during a pandemic is incredibly challenging, to say the least, and it's especially important that you take care of yourselves. This includes maintaining a good sleep schedule, eating right, getting exercise, finding ways to safely engage with your friends, and enjoying time outside as best you can. I recommend checking out the University Programs Council website for ideas about how to stay active, or the Contemplative Sciences Center website which identifies a whole array of mindfulness, yoga, and virtual retreat offerings throughout the semester. We'll also continue to offer resources for students experiencing added stress, anxiety, or other mental health impacts as a result of the challenges and uncertainty of this moment. Please check out the CAPS website for more information on ways to get support. As always, if you have questions or comments, please contact my colleague Matt Weber at mw2xy@virginia.edu. A couple of the segments on this show are based on your emails from last week. All right, that's it from me. Thanks for listening and for all that you're doing, and on with the rest of the show, and over to my very talented co-host, fourth-year student, Davion Zeno. Thank you.
What's up, guys? Zeno here, and I'm back like I left something. Come to you with the UVA team to talk all things COVID and news on grounds. As you know, last week, several dorm residents were tested after high levels of the virus showed up in their wastewater. Let's take a look at how all that works.
One of the things that we're doing on grounds to minimize the spread of COVID-19 is pooled wastewater testing, testing individual residence halls, sort of testing everybody in the building at once. One of the biggest challenges that we faced with COVID-19 is that people can spread the virus without having any symptoms. And wastewater surveillance is a great tool to detect some of those asymptomatic spreaders. We can detect SARS-CoV because it's shed in stool at pretty high rates, especially early in infection. By capturing wastewater, we can do a pooled sample of everybody that lives in the building that used the toilet that day and detect if there are new cases even before they have symptoms. This can provide an early warning system. We can then take further steps to test individuals once we detect that there might be new cases and ultimately limit the spread in the residence halls. So the wastewater surveillance gives us another tool to find cases early and minimize the chance of further spread.
So what happens when someone tests positive or is a close contact of someone who tested positive? Let's talk quarantine and isolation. Y'all remember those encyclopedic emails? Buckle up because we're on it again. Quarantine and isolation are different. Someone is asked to quarantine and separate from others when they have been in close contact with a person with COVID-19 or are awaiting their test results after a close contact. What's a close contact, you ask? Being within 6 feet of someone for more than 15 minutes. Isolation is the separation of people with COVID-19 from others who aren't sick. Here's a scenario. You have some symptoms of COVID-19, so you call Student Health and Wellness. If you need to come in and get a test, your results will get back to you quicker than a Jimmy John's sandwich. And not that quick, but usually within 48 hours of the test. But still, freaky fast. While you're waiting for a test or its results, you should be quarantining. If you live on grounds, the university will find you a spot. If you're off grounds, you should quarantine in your residence or back home, if it is safe to do so. Your test comes back positive, so you're in the isolation timeline. Get you a calendar, a journal, an agenda, or something, because dates are key here. Ready? Your isolation can end after at least 10 days have passed since your symptoms first appeared. You have had no fever for 24 hours without fever-reducing medication, and your other symptoms have improved. Otherwise, you should stay put until doctor says you're good to go. Okay, take two. No symptoms, but you've been in close contact with someone who has tested positive. Your best testing windows is 5 to 7 days after your last exposure, based on the virus incubation period. You'll need to quarantine until it's testing time. If you're positive but still have no symptoms, you may end isolation after at least 10 days have passed since the day of your test. See, jotting this all down, the dates is helpful. If you have a negative test results with no symptoms, you still quarantine because that virus can still develop. If you are still symptom-free after 14 days of quarantine, please get outside. Another big difference between isolation and quarantine is that you can isolate with others who have tested positive, but you should avoid quarantining together if at all possible. For example, say Sally lives with 5 other roommates and they were all exposed and decide to quarantine together. But it turns out Sally is actually the only one carrying the virus. Well, she may now have passed it to her other roommates. Get it? I know living with roommates can be hard on a good day, but if you must quarantine in a shared space, you should be doing your best to separate as much as possible from others. And when you can't wear a mask, practice social distancing. Clean surfaces often, and especially those in shared bathrooms, and avoid preparing food or eating together. For more information about quarantine and close quarters, check out these resources from the CDC and Student Health and Wellness. I know, this is all confusing, but the short answer to this is this: test or no test. Quarantining if you've been exposed or have symptoms, and isolating if you have a positive test are some of the most effective ways to keep your friends healthy. It's not fun, but it's oh so important. For more information, check out the Student Health and Wellness website. Also, don't forget, testing positive doesn't define you or say anything about you except you were exposed to COVID-19. This disease is highly contagious and you could be doing all the right things and still get exposed or test positive. The most important thing is to take action if you think you've been exposed. Be cooperative with contact tracing, which means you might be answering the phone even if you don't know the number. I know, I hate that too. And isolate or quarantine if you are asked to do so. In UVA news, last week the National Panhellenic Council faced racist slurs from anonymous users during a program the NPAC led on Zoom meant to encourage unity through social engagement in the Black community. The National Panhellenic Council was founded in 1930 and consists of historically Black fraternities and sororities that formed decades before. What happened that Monday is an example why the council and orgs associated were created in the first place, to form unity amongst Black people and combat overt and covert racism. I was there on that call, and yes, I am still angry, but the NPAC was still able to have a successful program. I am sorry for the 46 members on the call, and even more sorry to the first-year students who were exposed to such racism in one of their first attempts to build community on grounds. We can and must do better. Okay, that was a lot of information. Let's try to end with some good news. I'll give you a hint. It's about some cute animals.
We live in a small apartment complex and there's 7, 8 of us on the team here. So when we came back in July, we had a lot of time. It was just, you come here, you play hockey, and you go back to your apartment, and we have nothing else to do. So we decided this is the perfect time to start fostering animals. We had a kitten named Parker, but we renamed him Parkour because of the way that he would jump off of everything. And then 3 kittens, Queso, Quesadilla, and Taco. And then Oscar, who was 5 years old, and he was a boxer pit mix.
I actually still have one. This is the last one that's not adopted yet.
We made an Instagram account for them. We've been posting all of the kittens, and now people are coming to us from different parts of Charlottesville with their foster animals to post them to get them adopted. So we've actually done really well on it. I think Amber's gonna be so sad when the last one gets adopted. So I definitely think we'll be having more kittens in this apartment. Our team, we're friends on and off the field all the time. And that's how it's always been. That's just the culture of our team. So I think COVID has really impacted us in that sense of trying to still stay a team and stay together all the time. Having the animals here is one of those ways that we have found a bit of normalcy in everything. So I think they've been absolutely so much fun and have given us another reason to get together and still follow these protocols and follow all these rules that we have, but still have a sense of normalcy with it all.
That's it for this week of UVA Weekly. Don't forget to hit up the UVA team on Instagram or email us at uva@virginia.edu. I'm out like a light.
All across this place we call the Commonwealth, you'll find we have a way about us, a particular style, a certain way we carry the day on these broad, blue-red shoulders. It comes from being unafraid of the hard things, never losing sight of the little things. And when all is said and done, coming together for the good things. Because every inch, every number, every call, we earn. We write our own story, inked in the sweat of today. And this story is far from finished. So we're gonna keep pushing two-a-days, pulling double shifts, hitting the books, hitting the sleds, and hitting our toughest challenges with everything we got. Because we Cavaliers have a way to be both great and good. For the salt of the coast, for the stones of the capital, for the hug of Skyline Drive, for the playmakers, for the waymakers, for the daymakers. For all Virginia.